What you're looking at right here is the two most common styles of oil filters today. The spin-on filter and the cartridge filter. Oil goes in this gallery, comes out the center. The same on this style here. You will have a casing around the outside and the oil comes out here to lubricate your engine. Same as this one. So remember, the oil comes out the center to lubricate your engine. So let's get to myths, legends, and good tips and servicing of your vehicle when it comes to oil filters, and how to do a proper oil change. Welcome back to Steve Robb Reviews. Today is going to be an interesting subject, and I'm going to discuss some things that I think are myths. I think some things are, well, they call them in the olden days wives' tales, and I'm going to discuss best practices of changing your oil. Now, a lot of people may find this controversial, but leave a comment down below if there's anything that I'm saying that you're not too sure about, or maybe you think it's not right. You guys let me know. And we're going to start off with some automotive myths that carry on for generations that are just, you know what, they're just not factually correct. And one of them would be way back in the olden days, if you wanted to check out to see if your battery or your alternator was defective at all, the practice back then was to disconnect one of the battery cables, and if it kept running, well, then your alternator was working, and it was more likely your battery. And if it stalls, well, it's your alternator. And today, you really can't do that with late model vehicles. The electronics can get really wigged out, and it can cost you a fortune doing that kind of stuff. Another one would be, and I still hear this today, I have a battery out back on the concrete floor, and it's no good. It's an old battery. I'm just bringing it in for an exchange. And I still get people say to me, you know, you shouldn't store a battery on a concrete floor. It'll discharge. And you know, that is not true, but many people still believe it because they've been told by people from years ago, and they keep on repeating stuff that's just not so right. And yeah, you can leave a battery on a concrete floor all you want, and it's not going to discharge. But years ago, they didn't have the plastics and the materials we have today, and apparently it was valid back then, but it's not valid now. So let's take a look at some things that are valid on oil changes today that people continually do that just aren't right. As far as I'm concerned, you let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. Okay, so I showed the two style of filters, right? This one here is for my F-150, and it's a Motorcraft filter. Oil goes in the outside, comes up through the center. Do you know how many times I see people pour oil down the center from their jug of oil? And they say this is so that you don't get a dry start. Well, you know, there's actually nothing wrong with putting oil down the center to pre-fill your oil filter. But you run one big risk. And it's something that a lot of people don't think about. Take, for instance, this oil jug right here. You start pouring it in the center, and something from in here goes into the center of that oil filter. When you start up the vehicle, it's going right into the motor because it hasn't been filtered. That's where the oil that has been filtered comes out through the center. So, this one for an example, the oil goes around the media and comes out through the center. Same as the cartridge style there with the spin-on. So if there was anything in that oil that were to go into the center of that oil filter, well, now it's contaminating your engine. So a lot of people say, well, what's the odds of that? Well, there's a lot of odds on a lot of stuff, including the foil that goes around the outside of an oil filter. Some people aren't paying attention, and some of that foil goes down through the center hole. It could be just a chunk of stuff in processing that got through. How do you know how good the oil is filtered from the container that you just bought brand new? How do you know that there's not something in there? So best practices? Nah, you don't really need to. I worked for General Motors for 30 years, and there wasn't one vehicle that had the oil filter filled with oil prior to a start. They all went on dry. they started them up, and the oil pump, it fills that filter real fast. So the idea of the dry start stuff, I'm not buying that part. And you know, it may be, you know, like of some use years and years and years ago when we had super thick oil maybe, but today most of the oils are getting very, very, very thin. So take a look at the next one here. This is just a regular plug. Now this is for my Silverado, and the reason why I got rid of it, this is just a spare, is because it started to round over on the edges. They are not that hard of a metal anyways, and I put a new one in. And a lot of people don't do that. They will just keep on using the same plug forever and ever and ever and they don't even install the plug right. The only way to install your oil pan plug is to use a torque wrench to tighten it up with. Now, a lot of people are going to say, nah, you could just tighten it up hand tight. Well, that's fine, if you're good enough to do that. But you can watch enough YouTube to find out how many videos there are on stripped out oil pan plugs. There's lots of them, and people do it a lot. I'm going to use an example of a friend of mine. I lent him this bar, this breaker bar here, because he went to one of these quick lube places, and yeah, they changed his oil real quick, and guess what happened? They cross-threaded it. They must have been using an impact gun to drive it in with, but they cross-threaded it, and I had to give him this. I had to give him this to get the oil pan plug out. And that's because they're just not paying attention. I refuse to take any of my vehicles to any of these quick lube places because I think they're doing an oil change too quick, too fast, not paying attention. All kinds of reasons why. You guys can take them to your fast lube place if you like. I'm not a big fan of any fast lube places. I do it myself. I know it's done right. So let's move on to my borescope here, my endoscope they call it, or borescope, this kind of stuff. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about, should you get your engine oil up to operating temperature first, get it good and hot, and then drain your oil. That is ideal. That is ideal. Do I do it? Absolutely not. Do most oil change places do it? If you go to a quick lube place, you drive into a quick lube place, and you've been driven long enough to get your oil really hot, well, it happens there. But how many times do you go to a shop, you drop off your vehicle, they park it outside, say you're in Anchorage, Alaska, minus 40 below, they park it outside, tech gets around to it the next hour to change your oil. Do you think that he gets in that vehicle and drives around to get it really good and hot? Do you think that he just turns it on and leaves it out there in the parking lot to run for half an hour to get hot? It wouldn't even get that hot anyways, you know, minus 40. So no, a lot of places it's not being up to ideal temperatures to get hot, to drain. Does that make a difference? Well, I've actually put this in my oil pan on my F-150. I've got around 95,000 kilometers. So, you know, and it's a 2010. I put this in there and I didn't see anything that was odd. It was just oil dripping out. That was all. I didn't see no chunks, no sludge, none of that kind of stuff. So this idea of saying you got to get it really good and hot. Well, for me, I think the best ideal thing to do is to let it drip for a long period of time. Now, if you're in 40 below temperature, that oil is pretty thick. But today, most people are taking, you know, precautions on better maintenance and using synthetic oil, and it does pour out pretty good. But for me, I find the best thing to do is let it drain for an extended period of time. You take your vehicle to a fast lube, they're not letting it drip forever. They're just letting it, when most of it is gone out, they put the plug in, away you go, fill it up, and you're gone. So I think it's better to have it drain out. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, you got to get all that sludge out of the bottom. And I think that's from years and years ago, from different set of technology that was in engines back then. If you go back 40 years, yeah, a lot of engines sludged up a lot and that kind of stuff. Most times an engine sludging up has many variables. It could be running too cold. It could have the wrong engine oil in it. You know, there's all kinds of reasons why an engine would sludge up. But generally today, you're not going to see in the bottom of your oil pan some stuff like you see on YouTube where people open up the drain and big chunks coming out and that kind of stuff. In the future, I'm going to show my oil pan and let you know what that's all about. But when it comes to changing your oil, I'm going to ask you guys something. I want you to think about this first. Is there an expiry date on your oil? Think about that. You go buy your oil and you'll see a bunch of codes, like on this one here. I don't know if you can see that. You'll see a bunch of codes on there and a bunch of lettering and that kind of stuff. Well, most of the time this is going to be the production date. So a buddy of mine I ran into from Imperial Oil, I was asking him about oil. Does it go bad? He goes, well, you're not going to see an expiry date on a jug oil. But yeah, there's an expiry date. I mean, it's not good for 40 years. You know, that kind of stuff. And he said the biggest problem with engine oil is people will go to, you know, a great deal. Get a great deal on a whole bunch of oil. Put it out in your garden shed somewhere, in a steel shed. It's 140 degrees in the summertime. This has to be stored under ideal conditions too. So there is storage requirements. There's all kinds of stuff. But they don't talk about that part, right? They don't want to make it difficult for you to store your oil, maintain the product date codes and that kind of stuff. But yeah, there is an expiry date. And most of the time it has to do with, as far as I could understand, was the makeup of the oil and the manufacturer and how much you paid for the oil. You pay more money, you're going to get better oil most of the time. But what happens is you leave this on your counter, or you got a 5-liter jug or a 5-gallon bucket or whatever it is. You leave it there for a couple of years. Now you go and do your oil change and you just start pouring it out. Well, if any of you have ever paid attention, especially shop owners, they would notice this. You get down to the end of the jug here and you'll see a different color of oil coming out. And that's because all the additive package has settled down the bottom. Guess what I was told? Yeah, you should shake your oil before you actually put it in. So a lot of you guys that are shop owners, you've probably noticed that when you get down to the end of a jug that's been sitting around for a while, you'll see some different colored oil coming out the end, like a darker colored oil. And that's the additive package that has settled down to the bottom of your jug. And I thought that was interesting and something that I had no idea about. So when it comes to changing your oil, there are some things, there's some best practices. A lot of people don't do that. How many people use a torque wrench? I use a torque wrench. Only because I have the torque wrench, it's here already. It doesn't take a lot of time for me to do it. And I just write it on the outside of my oil pan in a marker. So every time I get underneath there, I know what the torque is. And it's simple and easy to do. But this idea of filling the filter full of oil first is something that I brought up with a friend of mine from Imperial Oil. He's a retired fella. He said, no, don't do that because the odds are you're never going to have a problem. But he said the one time that they have a like a problem at the manufacturing plant, or it hasn't been filtered correctly and there might be something in there, well, it's going right in. So as soon as you start it up, boom, it's going right into your engine. That could be very expensive and costly. So, just like most manufacturers, I don't know any manufacturer that fills their oil first on the production line. They put them in dry. Can you imagine somebody having to fill all these filters up first and then putting them on and, this kind of thing? It doesn't happen, right? And when you get your oil changed at these fast lube places, well, they're not letting it drain for an extended period of time. For me, I've never noticed the sludge buildup in the bottom of my oil pan. I do use synthetic oil. And I don't think, you guys let me know in the comments, I do not think that it's absolutely required to get your vehicle up to this hot operating temperature to drain your oil. I think myself, people should spend more time letting it drain, and just letting it sit there, even for a couple hours. I mean, if you're just changing oil yourself, just let it drain out there. That's no problem. So, you guys let me know what you think. I think it's an interesting subject. It's a subject that a lot of people may not think about, especially using a torque wrench or filling their filter full of oil. And you know, because this style here, it drains right into the oil pan completely once you turn your car off. And it has to pump up all the way again, all over again. You know, it's not a sealed container like this one here. So, you know, you got to use a little bit of logic here too. And, you know, a lot of times when you're servicing your vehicle, a lot of people will take old advice from old timers like me and say, you know what, just disconnect the battery cable if you want to find out if your battery's no good or if your alternator's no good, or don't store that battery on a concrete floor. You know, and people will actually pass that on from generation to generation. So thanks for joining me here today. You guys let me know in the comments if you think anything I said was not correct. And I believe the one that a lot of people are going to be most concerned about is, should you have your engine oil hot, or is it okay to let it drain out when it's cold? Well, ideal is hot, but I don't like getting my hands burnt, or, you know, hot exhaust and hot, you know, all that stuff underneath there hot. I don't do it. I change mine when it's cold. Now, of course, I don't change mine when it's minus 30. I make sure I change mine, you know, in the fall. And that's what I do. And I've never noticed any problem. And I have put that scope in there, that endoscope, and looked in there, and it looked clean as a whistle to me. So, you know, I'm not too sure about that one. So, these guys come back again. I'm going to get some more tips like this in the future. And if you haven't seen this channel before, well, you're welcome to subscribe. These guys take care. Cheers.